welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and how much removal should we be putting in our decks, I wonder? Of course, I'm a guy that's been advocating for people to put more removal in their decks since the beginnings of my channel. As I just talked about in my video about my deck building philosophy, I tend to put more removal in there because I want to enable the fun things that I want to do in a game, and in order to do that, I have to stop people from what they're doing, typically winning, but also anything that might be shutting me down from what I'm doing. Now, I also made a video about a month ago talking about how board wipes have maybe gotten worse in the format. And my argument there was there's just so many effects that are the I protect my whole team. I'm blaming White for this one. Every set we seem to get a new one. Protect my whole team, protect my life as well. But the big part here is I'm protecting my whole team with either hexproof, indestructible, or phasing stuff out that board wipes are getting worse and worse and worse. It used to be when I first started playing the Commander format, if you threw a board wipe out there, you pretty much knew you were getting every creature. And pretty much right after I started playing the Commander format, in fact, they came out with Heroic Intervention. That was actually the first sort of option. A green option was sort of the first option for I just protect my whole team. I guess Boros Charm existed before that, but nobody played Boros decks back then, so you didn't see Boros Charm very often. And it really is a blowout. It's like a reverse blowout where that guy gets to keep all his stuff and no one else does, right? I say all the time, it's sort of like the opposite of a Cyclonic Rift. It completely unbalances the game and in a lot of cases set up someone for the win. Here you are thinking you're going to clear the board and set everything back to parity, and in actuality, you've just made the situation 100 times worse. This literally just happened to me in a game yesterday where I thought I was going to solve the problem of the guy who was way ahead of everyone else playing his mono white Mondrak deck. He had a bunch of creatures in play, and wouldn't you know it, Flare of Fortitude, and all my efforts were wasted. He ended up just winning the game on his turn after that. That is the argument I'm making for maybe how board wipes have gotten worse. However, a couple people said in the comments of that video, well, actually, maybe targeted removal has gotten worse because of Ward and Hexproof. And of course, particularly Ward. Hexproof, obviously, you can't use targeted removal on those creatures. And Ward, of course, is all over the damn place. They're just throwing Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3 on like every single commander now, it seems. So maybe even spot removal's kind of gotten worse for that reason as well. So maybe just removal has gotten worse in general. But of course, we need it, right? We absolutely need it. It's one of the most important things. In fact, I could maybe even argue that it is the most important thing that you need in a commander game. I will give one scenario of why, okay? And when you're talking about the most important things in a commander deck, card draw and ramp are always at the top of the list for most people. Removal is there as well. For me, I could argue that removal could even be more important than the card draw and the ramp because it brings things back to parity, right? That's what removal does so well. My opponents are going off with their ramp and their card draw and whatever else. I play my basic planes and pass turn. I do that again the second turn. I do that again the third turn. And then I cast Hour of Revelation. So without any card draw, ramp, or anything, I've brought in the game not entirely back to parity, but pretty much back to everyone being on the same level as me. I'll just say that is one of the things that White does best. But I don't want to get into a whole thing about what's the most important thing in a commander deck. Certainly, I think everyone agree removal is really important. So what is the solution here, right? Board wipes are getting worse because of all of these protect my whole team cards that we have in the format now. Spot removal is possibly even getting worse because of the hexproof and the ward. And of course, a lot of those protect my team things also do the hexproof. So that's going to work against spot removal as well. I think we have two solutions, okay? And the first solution is a real simple one, which is just you play more removal, right? You just put more removal in your deck. I will just say that same game that I played last night, I was playing my Lulu and Guild Artisan deck. I have 4 board wipes in that deck. I believe on my 5 rules for deck building video, I talked about how I like minimum 3 board wipes in a commander deck, preferably 4. And I had a lot of people in there telling me, oh man, the game will never end. 4 board board wipes, you're not going to draw all 4. You might not even draw 1. And in fact, that's what happened last night. 4 board wipes in my deck. I didn't draw a single one. So the game ended really, really quickly. 4 board wipes is a minimum for me because I basically have to assume that one of my opponents is going to cast a Heroic Intervention or a Teferi's Protection at some point, right? In my opinion, you now have to increase the amount of board wipes you have in your deck because of those cards existing in the format. You might say the same for spot removal as well. We need to start putting more removal in our decks. I'm going to, okay? And that's the recommendation that I am giving to other people as well. The other option is putting board wipes or removal that gets around those things. So I'll give a really funny example here. Abrupt Decay, okay? That's not a card you ever see in Commander. And funny enough, I actually played it a little bit when I first started playing Commander, of course, because I came from Modern and that was a Modern staple. So I started putting it on my Commander decks. But of course, mana value 3 or less is not super great. However, it can't be countered, right? And if you put a removal spell like that in your deck that can't be countered, it gets around Ward. Just throwing that out as an example, but we can start playing removal that gets around some of these things. Toxic Deluge, for example, obviously already played in the format, gets around the Indestructible, right? If your opponent cast a Flare of Fortitude, that is going to work against a lot of things, but a lot of things will get around it. So playing board wipes or spot removal that will get around those protections is an answer. The other answer is playing board wipes that favor you. This is something I talk about all the time. You always should be doing that, right? The reason why it's even more important now to play the board wipes that favor you is because of those protection spells. I recently put Calamity of Cinders in my Lulu deck. If that's the board wipe I had in my hand, and that's the one I had cast in that moment, which I did not, of course, but if I did, well, my opponent would have cast their protection spell just like they did. The only difference is all my creatures would have been tapped, so they would have stuck around, right? It wouldn't have been so one-sided. It wouldn't have been one person having all their creatures and everyone else is blown out. I would have had my stuff as well, right? So those kinds of board wipes, the board wipes that favor you is going to be extra good now because if nobody has any protection spells, you're the only one with creatures left. But if that one guy does have that protection spell to keep their team around, they're not going to be the only one. You're going to have creatures as well, right? Split Up was another one that just came out in Duskmourn that is a fantastic possible. Of course, you got to work around it to make it to your advantage. It can possibly be a one-sided board wipe, or it should be at least advantaging you. Austere Command, another board wipe that is traditionally used in the format for the reason that it is very easy to advantage yourself, right? I got mostly big creatures. I got mostly small creatures. I can avoid the creatures I don't want to hit and hurt my opponents more so. So that is another way to work around this issue of everyone's got protections. Everyone's got ways to get around removal. I think there has been a real arms race lately with removal and protection spells where every set we're getting better and better removal, but at the same time, we're getting better and better protection spells as well. And I think protection is winning that race. The protection spells are so good now that it is really becoming difficult to make sure no one has an answer in their hand. I mean, Flare of Fortitude is free. In fact, in the game last night, that is what my opponent cast. He had only 1 mana open, so I knew a Teferi's Protection wasn't coming. Teferi's Protection's good, but Flare of Fortitude is better when you don't have 3 mana open, right? So I believe that protection spells are winning this arms race of protection versus removal. And so for that reason, we got to start putting more removal in our decks, or we got to start playing removal that will get around those protections, or we have to start playing board wipes that will advantage us so that it's not just wipe the board of all creatures, it's wipe the board of most of the creatures, but I get to keep the majority of mine. That way, if we see any of those protection spells, it's not going to be a complete blowout, right? As I've been saying since the beginning of my channel, I think people should play more removal because removal does indeed win games. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.